We've seen time banking go through, I'll say, different phases as people started off with the idea of a sort of community-based model that was grassroots, of neighbors helping neighbors. And then the next thing that happened was that organizations that had a mission or a service delivery function began understanding that this might be a tool to enlist volunteers and enlist the very people whom they were helping as partners in the effort to fulfill their mission. I think we're seeing a third phase emerge. I'll call it the social enterprise phase. I think there's a lot of knowledge that's been built up about how to do things, different alternatives, and we're now trying to say, how do we begin to share that knowledge, and and Sam has been talking, but independently we talked about thinking about the Time Bank network not as simply a network, but as a sort of organic learning organization that is trying to find a new way to deal with the social problems that we see, that there's not enough money to deal with, that there'll never be enough money to deal with it, as best I can tell. We really need to think about the resources we have. And when we look at people, if we only look at, quote, their marketable skills, we are looking at a very small portion of who they are, and we are enlisting a very small portion of the real capacity and real, frankly, wealth of this community. And what time banking is about honoring all of those things that the market, in effect, does not value, does not reward. It doesn't reward caring labor, it doesn't reward raising children, it doesn't reward mentoring, it doesn't pay for civic engagement, it doesn't pay for, excuse me, hell raising. But those are important and vital functions for the kind of world that Stirling has historically stood for. What I've suggested to time banks in the States is that why doesn't a time bank offer to help the legislative officials, the executive officials with citizen inquiries, and then report back to them, and then, God forbid, if somebody does a good job, you could actually praise them. I know that's an insane idea, but you know, but also if the person wasn't satisfied, you'd have a witness in another time bank member to say he gave him a runaround, he didn't really respond to what he wanted. And so what I'm saying is, maybe a joint job would be, how do we make government more responsive to the needs of people? And the answer is, we need to do it in partnership with community. And why don't we try and find a mechanism in one community, actually set up a citizens complaint office, and the government then partnered with the citizen complaint office run by the time bank to jointly deal with the problems. You know, what I'm hearing in this room is some valiant pioneers struggling pretty much alone to somehow sell this weirdo idea to a group of strangers with varying degrees of success, sort of on the side, and with never the concentrated resources or support that's needed. Now, I would hope, for instance, that out of this we could get an agreement and we begin to say, let's create a time bank YouTube program so that people can at least hear the stories. I mean, you and I and others in this room have heard what magic this has had in a person's life at a time in a special kind of way, and how they've been affirmed. Well, one thing that we could have is, let's agree that there's going to be an effort to collect those stories, and somebody's going to take some responsibility for nagging us to make sure we do it, okay?
Edgar, thanks so much that we've just finished the last event of your 2 days in Scotland, the Time Banking Network. So can you tell us a little bit about who have you been meeting and seeing in the last 2 days up here?
Well, I've been meeting wonderful people. I've been meeting everybody from officials to members of councils to heads of departments to heads of time bank programs to members of time bank programs, and then to people who are enrolled in a course on common ground who are really wanting to change the world. So I've had a chance to meet with a good range of folks in different positions.
Why do you think you're in such high demand?
I think people now know that the old ways of doing things aren't working, and even if they were working, there's not enough money to continue doing simply more of the same, that we need to look for new ideas. But also in Scotland, I'm feeling a new sense of confidence and a new willingness that they can walk out on space without permission and create something new. I think that comes from really the emergence of Scotland, the sense of self-confidence as a nation about where you're going, and that and people know that it's now in their hands, and they're excited about that.
One of the things that strikes me very different this time to the last visit is the interest from local authorities and the public services around the concept in time banking, not so much about funding time banks, but actually to embrace the values within their own thinking and practices. I've never heard or seen that before. Is that something that you've picked up, and is that a hope perhaps that interest and commitment to learn about the time banking approach within the authorities themselves could be the catalyst for a real growth in the period ahead?
Well, I think we've gained a credibility. For decades, we've been talking about citizen participation, citizen engagement, parent participation, and everybody's been exhorting it and saying and calling for it, and different people have been promising to deliver it. And I don't know of anything that's delivered it in the way time banking has.
Absolutely.
So that we represent at least a credible possibility for something we've known. They've been preaching this in social work, in the ministry, in teaching. We know that participation matters, and we haven't been able to get it. And time banking does get attention and does get engagement.
Well, Edgar, there's a taxi waiting for you just now, and that old proverbial question, what's your last statement to us as you were catching a bus and leaving us? Have you got a sentence that you would sum up the 2 days in Scotland for us?
My hope is that I've set in motion a dynamic process, and that since I'm the bad penny that comes back, the fact that people know I'm going to be coming in September to say, well, what have you done since I've seen you in May, that they will feel a responsibility to produce something that will give us an opportunity to really dig in and take the next step.